This dumb boy named Kim Jin-taek was awakened early in the morning by the loud ringing of his big black alarm. As he turned in his bed to gather himself, he noticed that his fat daughter, Yunji, was still lying beside him, fast asleep. After quietly getting up, he made his way to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast. While doing so, he asked Yunji whether she truly intended to skip eating again. In response, she explained that eating before her morning run made her feel uncomfortable, as if her body could not handle it well. Hearing this, he reminded her that skipping breakfast was neither a good idea nor a healthy habit, insisting that she should at least eat something before heading out. Yunji then moved closer to him and suggested that he could simply pack a small portion for her, assuring him that she would eat it later. Soon after, she picked up a water bottle and left the house. He remained standing there for a moment, watching her leave, feeling a subtle mix of concern and quiet anticipation. Kim Jin-taek was a man in his late 30s, living in Seoul. According to his national residence registration, his name was officially recorded as Kim Jin-taek, and professionally, he served as the chief of the strategy team at the Gisong Group, as indicated on his business card. He had built a reputation for himself as someone who consistently delivered outstanding performance, particularly in the latter half of the year, as documented by the HR department. In the relentless competition of modern society, he had shaped himself into a person defined by efficiency, discipline, and results. It was widely believed among his colleagues that he often skipped company dinners and social gatherings in order to focus solely on his work. As a result, rumors circulated that he deliberately kept his distance from others, perhaps even appearing arrogant or overly self-assured. While best-selling books across the country emphasized the importance of networking as the key to success, Jin-taek had instead mastered the art of viewing people as numbers. He built his team based on measurable performance, valuing individuals with high results while disregarding the opinions of those who did not meet his standards. Managing interpersonal relationships had always been his weakness, something that occasionally held him back. However, the performance reports never lied, and they reflected a stable life built on a strong and calculated foundation. Yet, despite this carefully constructed life, everything began to shift due to an unexpected call from his sister-in-law after years of silence. During the call, she informed him that Yunji had been accepted into Korea University. This news came as a surprise to him, as he had not anticipated that she would pursue higher education, let alone attend a university so close to his home. Then, without much warning, his sister-in-law asked him for a favor. She requested that Yunji be allowed to stay at his house temporarily, and just like that, Yunji came to live with him. This situation caused him to reflect on the past, recalling a time when Yunji was still a small child who used to call him dad. Back then, his sister-in-law would quickly correct her, telling her not to use that term and to call him uncle instead, fearing that others might misunderstand their relationship. Despite the scolding, Yunji had remained stubborn and continued to address him in her own way. Returning to the present, Jin-taek found himself thinking that he had initially assumed it would be easy to act merely as a temporary guardian. However, the moment Yunji arrived, her presence seemed to overlap with that of her mother, making the situation far more complicated than he had anticipated. He had given her a separate room and told her to let him know if she needed anything. Still, he could not help but feel a sense of regret. Instead of the mysterious and distant image he had once held, the person who now stood before him was a quiet, reserved 20-year-old woman, and he found himself unsure of how to interact with her. Yunji had very specific habits, especially when it came to food. She was selective and followed a strict diet. When he suggested that his meal plan was balanced and encouraged her not to skip anything, she calmly responded that she preferred to manage her own diet. Her reply left him momentarily embarrassed, making him realize that she was no longer someone he could easily guide. Yet, despite her distant demeanor during the day, there were moments at night when she would quietly lie beside him and fall asleep. What troubled him most was the lingering, faint scent of her shampoo that remained on the bed afterward. To someone like him, who had always lived a disciplined and structured life, sharing such a lovely space with his niece, who resembled her mother so closely, felt both overwhelming and unsettling. At the same time, Yunji was known to be an exceptional athlete and student. Those around her constantly praised her extraordinary talent and dedication. One day, after finishing her run, Yunji received a message from Jin-taek, asking her to meet him outside the campus. When he arrived, they both sat in the car, and he asked her whether she had a boyfriend. She replied that she did not have time for such distractions, as they would interfere with her routine. Hearing this, he reflected on how she always returned home at the same time and had never once come back late. Her discipline, strict adherence to her diet, and unwavering commitment to her training impressed him, even by his own high standards. Still, he could not help but think that, as a college student, she must have other desires or experiences she wished to explore. When they returned home, they noticed a parcel placed at the door. Jin-taek wondered if he had ordered something, but before he could think further, Yunji hurried toward him and quickly grabbed the package, claiming that it belonged to her. This sudden reaction surprised him. As she handled it, the parcel accidentally tore open, revealing what appeared to be a sus toy inside. The situation instantly became awkward and embarrassing. Without saying much, she grabbed the item and rushed into her room. Later, she explained that she had mistakenly taken the parcel because she had been expecting an urgent delivery. Even so, Jintaek found himself speechless, as she did not seem like someone who would be interested in such things. That night, he approached her door and asked if she wanted dinner. She replied that she was not hungry. He reminded her that she still had training the next day and offered to prepare something light, but she firmly repeated that she did not want to eat. Despite her refusal, he later found himself in the kitchen, cooking. When she eventually came out of her room, he told her that since she had skipped dinner earlier, he had prepared something for her. He also gently added that she did not need to share everything with him, but she should not keep everything bottled up either. He suggested that if something was troubling her, she could always ask for help. However, Yunji did not respond. Instead, she quietly packed the food and left the house. Watching her leave, Jintaek realized that this situation might lead to further complications, especially since she seemed unwilling to communicate with him at all. From that day onward, in an effort to break the growing silence between them, he decided that he would simply go along with whatever she did, even if he suspected that some of it might not be entirely right. In the morning, at the Courier Sports University's track and field department, all the participants were gathered together, and it was observed that they were complaining about the intensity of the coach's training, while also engaging in light conversations among themselves. Yunji was also present there, quietly standing and listening to the others without actively participating. After some time, a girl named Hijo entered the room, and it was noted that she began talking enthusiastically, mentioning that it had been amazing. Meanwhile, another girl who was seated nearby asked whether the delivery had arrived, to which Hijo responded that it was still being prepared and that it was not important at the moment. She then shifted the topic and mentioned that the student council building and the swimming room were connected, explaining that she had done her homework there the previous day. She further shared that she had heard some noise from the swimming pool late at night, which made her curious about who could possibly be training at that hour. As a result, she had gone inside to take a look and had seen two people engaged in cardio training. It was described that Hijo narrated this entire story to everyone present, capturing their attention. Suddenly, she hugged Yunji from behind, which startled Yunji and made her visibly scared. Hijo reacted playfully, stating that she could not get over Yunji's cute reaction and expressing a slight concern that Yunji might not be able to tolerate such situations. Another girl present there commented jokingly that innocent Yunji did not need a man and that she herself would stay with her, which caused Yunji to feel extremely embarrassed. At that moment, Yunji seemed to realize how the situation had escalated into something so awkward. Yunji then recalled a past moment with her friends. It was remembered that one of her friends had suggested that they should check out Yang Yang, as it had become quite popular recently. In response, Hijo had remarked that Yunji was not interested in anything other than sports. Reflecting on this, Yunji admitted to herself that she had always focused only on working out and training, and before she even realized it, she had gained the image of being an innocent girl. She acknowledged that all the girls around her tended to protect her from boys, and honestly, she had never been particularly interested in such matters. However, she also admitted that she had grown curious after hearing Hijo's story, and had even brought something along to join the conversation, which turned out to be that sus toy. Returning to the present, Yunji was in her room, feeling troubled and unsure about how she would face her father from then on. She reflected that perhaps she should have told her friends that she was already aware of such things, but she quickly realized that doing so might ruin her carefully maintained image. At the same time, she remembered that her father had always told her that she could share anything with him. Later that night, it was noted that she thought about those words again and considered that this might be the right time to talk to him. With many conflicting thoughts running through her mind, she slowly made her way to his room. Upon entering, she saw that he was asleep on the bed. As she cautiously moved closer, she attempted to reach out and touch him, but almost immediately, she became overwhelmed with embarrassment and quickly ran back to her own room. On the other side, Jintaek woke up in his room, seemingly unaware of what had just happened. A few days later, Jintaek was present in a meeting room where a presentation was taking place. However, it was evident that he was lost in his own thoughts and not paying attention to the ongoing discussion. Suddenly, a man called out his name, which startled him, as he seemed unprepared and unaware of what was being asked. After the meeting concluded, he sat with his colleagues, and one of them asked whether something was wrong with him. In response, Jintaek admitted that he had been sleep-deprived and revealed that since a certain day, Yunji had been coming to his room almost every night, gradually decreasing the distance between them. He confessed that he did not know how to react and had been pretending to be asleep the entire time. The man he was speaking to was manager Jung, Jintaek then asked him whether he had a daughter, to which Jung replied that he did, and that she was in the 4th grade. Jintaek further inquired how he managed the situation when his daughter insisted on sleeping with him. Jung laughed and explained that, although it could be a bit tiring when she clung to him after work, such moments were quite rare. He added that if other children found out that she still slept with her father despite being in elementary school, she might get teased, which was why he avoided encouraging such behavior. He also mentioned that as children grow older, they naturally stop seeking such closeness, and he himself did not even get many chances to hug his daughter anymore. Hearing this, Jintaek reflected internally that such behavior might appear cute when it involved a child, but in his situation, the girl who had been coming to him was already 20 years old and fully grown. He began to think that perhaps he should have stopped her earlier. Afterward, he returned home and lay down on his bed, feeling extremely tired. However, when he woke up again, he noticed that Yunji was once more present in his room. Despite realizing this, he continued to pretend to be asleep, while Yunji quietly occupied herself by playing with his weapon. One day, after finishing his office work, Jintaek went to a bar, where it was observed that a woman was sitting beside him, appearing emotional and somewhat drunk. He glanced at her, and gradually recalled that he had seen her before during a visit to Yunji's university for some business-related work. At that time, he had noticed the same girl talking on the phone, discussing a presentation and other related matters, and mentioning that she would call back once she had finished working on the project with her friends. At that moment in the bar, the woman turned toward him and reminded him that it was a non-smoking area. Jintaek immediately apologized for his mistake. The woman then mentioned that he could smoke behind the building, and, after saying that, she left the area. Returning to the present, it was noted that she seemed to recognize him as the same man who had been smoking earlier. She began speaking in a frustrated tone, questioning whether men, when drunk, even see their family members as women. She then revealed that her boyfriend had slept with a female friend, and afterward had gathered the family together and begged her to forgive him. Jintaek realized that she was completely intoxicated. He responded by suggesting that she should do whatever she truly wanted, without overthinking what was right or wrong. In response, she remarked that truth did not really matter in such situations, and interpreted his words as meaning that if she wanted to forgive her boyfriend, she should do so, and if not, she should simply leave him and move on. She then commented that he seemed to be making a big deal out of the situation and asked whether he had ever dated someone. Jintaek replied that he did not wish to discuss such personal matters with someone he considered too young. After saying this, he left the bar and went outside to smoke. However, the woman followed him and expressed her gratitude for his words. He then advised her to go back home, as it was getting late. She responded by insisting that she was not a child and stated that she was 20 years old. She then moved closer to him and declared that she intended to do whatever she wanted. At that moment, Jintaek found himself observing her closely and thinking that perhaps he was feeling a sense of excitement because he had never been involved with someone so young before. The woman then suggested that they spend time together, referring to it as a kind of training session, and after some hesitation, he agreed. The two of them then went to a hotel and spent the night together. The next morning, when Jintaek woke up, he noticed that the woman was already gone, as if the events of the previous night had never happened. Shortly after, his phone started ringing, and it was a call from Yunji. He informed her that he was not at home, explaining that he had some work to take care of. After collecting himself, he returned home and took some medication, reflecting on his actions and convincing himself that going out drinking with a 20-year-old and spending time with her had been a good decision. While he was still lost in his thoughts, someone entered the room. For a moment, he assumed it might be Yunji, but to his surprise, it turned out to be the same woman from the bar once again. The girl was also visibly surprised to see Jintaek there, as she had not expected his presence at all. Before she could fully process the situation, Yunji approached from behind and called out to her, addressing her as Sula, while mentioning that she had been calling her from the ground floor, but she had not responded. At the same moment, Yunji also noticed Jintaek and appeared equally surprised, asking him whether he had already come home. In response, he stated that he had just arrived. It was then that he quickly realized that Sula was someone Yunji knew personally. Yunji proceeded to introduce Sula as her friend, and both of them exchanged warm greetings with Jintaek before entering the house together. Once inside, Yunji mentioned to Sula that she had not been able to find the exact item she was asked to bring, but had brought something else instead. Sula responded casually that it was fine and suggested that they should hurry and get started. Meanwhile, Jintaek remained seated, silently reflecting on the situation, thinking that no matter how small the world might be, he had never imagined that someone he had met just the previous night would turn out to be someone so closely connected to him, almost like a niece. After a short while, Yunji approached him and said that she had a favor to ask. She explained that she and her friend were planning to spend time together, just the two of them. He asked whether she needed some space, to which she replied that it was not about that. She then clarified that she had told her friend that she was living with her father and requested that, at least in front of Sula, she be allowed to address him as dad. Hearing this, Jintaek had a sudden flashback. He recalled that 20 years earlier, when Yunji was only 8 years old, her father, his older brother, had passed away. Since then, her habit of calling him dad must have stemmed from that loss. He realized that although her mature appearance might have misled him, in reality, she was still just a young girl who had only recently turned 20, and the void of losing her father could never truly be filled. After reflecting on this, he agreed to her request. Meanwhile, Yunji and Sula went into the kitchen, where they began discussing diet plans and preparing food together. Sula advised Yunji that, since she was in a recovery phase after a short-term training camp, she needed to focus on antioxidants and asked whether she had been taking omega-3 supplements. Yunji replied that she had been taking iron supplements, to which Sula responded that she had carefully prepared the meal according to proper nutritional values. As this conversation continued, Jintaek sat on the sofa observing them, thinking that Sula might be aiming to become a nutritionist, and noting that the two of them seemed very close. At the same time, he decided internally that he would not bring up anything about what had happened earlier. At one point, Yunji turned toward him and asked whether he had placed the tomato paste somewhere else. He replied that he would check and soon handed it over, mentioning that it seemed a bit old and might be close to its expiration date. Sula responded calmly that as long as it had not been opened, it should still be fine. As he looked at her, he felt that she was acting as if nothing had happened, pretending naturally, which made him feel as though he was the only one struggling with the awkwardness. He then helped them open the jar, explaining that it had been in the fridge for a while and was tightly sealed. Later that night, Yunji and Sula were in Yunji's room, continuing their conversation. Sula asked about Yunji's father's personality, and Yunji replied by describing him as somewhat condescending, rigid, and strict, adding that he could be frustrating at times and lacked a sense of humor, even mentioning that he could not even make a proper dad joke. She also added that he often acted overly concerned, interfering even in matters like her diet. Hearing this, Sula responded with a smile, saying that from what she had heard, he actually seemed like a good person, and even commented that he was quite handsome. Meanwhile, on the other side, Jintaek was sitting in his room, busy working on his computer. At that moment, Sula entered the room quietly while he was on a phone call. He gestured for her to remain silent and continued discussing work-related matters. She sat there patiently until he finished. After ending the call, he asked her about Yunji, to which she replied that Yunji had fallen asleep in her room, as they had been talking for a long time and had even had a bit of alcohol, which made her tired. As he listened, while still partially focused on his work, Sula then mentioned that there was a reason she had come to see him. Suddenly, he asked for her number, saying that it would be difficult to communicate otherwise and that even her messenger ID would be sufficient. She responded that she would give him her number right away. However, he then clarified that he wanted to settle what had happened the previous night, telling her to name any amount and that he would transfer the money immediately, suggesting that they should treat it as a mistake and move on. This statement visibly frustrated Sula. He then asked whether she had not been expecting such a resolution, but she firmly replied that she had no intention of settling things in that manner. He insisted that he was serious and not joking, but she responded just as seriously, stating that instead of money, what she wanted was to meet him again specifically, to have another cardio training session with him. Jintaek firmly rejected Sula's offer, but in response, it was observed that Sula immediately resorted to threatening him, implying that she might reveal everything to Yunji. Hearing this, Jintaek warned her that such an action would only complicate matters further, especially considering that she and Yunji were close friends. He explained that the consequences would not affect only him, but would be far worse for her if Yunji were to discover the truth about their relationship. Internally, he reflected that he had already anticipated that she might use such a tactic. Despite his resistance, the situation escalated, and eventually, he found himself giving in and continuing the workout sessions with her. After one such encounter, as Sula was about to leave the room, she opened the door and unexpectedly found Yunji standing outside. Yunji appeared confused and remarked that she thought Sula had gone outside. Sula was visibly startled, while Yunji questioned why she was coming out of her father's room. Trying to maintain composure, Sula explained that she had gone there because she thought he might need something to eat. However, Yunji reminded her that she had earlier mentioned going out for some fresh air. Sula quickly adjusted her explanation, saying that she had intended to go to the convenience store, but had forgotten her card. Yunji, seeming slightly unwell, mentioned that she could feel her hangover coming on and that she needed some chocolate milk. Sula immediately offered to go and buy it for her, suggesting that Yunji should return to her room and rest. Yunji, however, added that she also wanted to step out for some fresh air. The following morning, Jintaek woke up to a message from Sula in which she mentioned that he had been asleep, so she left without waking him. She also added that, although she had initially been upset because of her boyfriend, she was now feeling better because of him. After that, she continued to send him unnecessary messages throughout the day, whether he was at the office or at the gym, which gradually began to irritate him. Jintaek started reconsidering the situation, realizing that offering money had not resolved anything. He began to think that perhaps there was another way to end things properly, and concluded that he would need to meet her again to put a final stop to everything. However, before he could even arrange a meeting, he unexpectedly heard Sula's voice in his office, where she was asking around about him. Seeing her there left him completely frustrated. As soon as she spotted him, she ran toward him cheerfully and explained that she had found his office address on his business card. Meanwhile, their colleagues began whispering among themselves, assuming that the young girl might be his girlfriend. Feeling uneasy about the situation, Jintaek quickly took Sula outside to talk. They went to a restaurant, and after finishing their meal, Sula casually explained that she had only come because she had just one lecture that day. Jintaek scolded her, telling her not to come to his workplace unnecessarily, as he disliked becoming the subject of gossip. In response, Sula playfully remarked that in dramas, girlfriends often visit their boyfriends at work and asked whether he liked such scenarios. This further frustrated him, and he asked whether she was trying to turn their situation into some kind of boyfriend-girlfriend game. She firmly responded that it was not a game and insisted that they were actually in a relationship. Jintaek reiterated that what had happened between them was a mistake and that they had both been drunk. However, Sula countered that she had been completely sober, a claim he refused to accept. She then questioned why he was so reluctant to accept her as his girlfriend, asking whether it was because of their age difference or social gap. She dismissed such reasons as excuses and argued that they should not prevent them from being together. Despite this, Jintaek clearly stated that he had no intention of seeing her again. However, she ignored his words and confessed that she had genuinely enjoyed spending time with him and wanted to continue seeing him a little longer. He firmly told her not to come to his house again. Later, when he returned home, Jintaek reflected on everything. He remembered that Sula had previously mentioned her boyfriend's betrayal and began to suspect that her actions might be driven by a desire for revenge or emotional compensation. He reasoned that she probably had no intention of exposing their secret to Yunji and briefly considered that continuing things with her might not cause immediate harm. However, as he lay down and began to fall asleep, he suddenly noticed Yunji entering his room again. This time, before she could do anything, he woke up, grabbed her hand, and demanded to know why she was there. The next day, he approached Yunji and told her that he was aware that she had been sneaking into his room the previous night. He stated that he assumed she must be going through something difficult and that he was willing to overlook it. Yunji then asked whether he had been pretending to sleep all this time. He admitted that he had noticed her actions and gently told her that she seemed to need someone to lean on. However, he also added that her recent behavior had become increasingly difficult for him to accept, and he wanted to avoid any situation that could lead to misunderstandings between them. Hearing this, Yunji apologized sincerely for everything and, after expressing her concerns, quietly left the room. Watching her go, Jintaek reflected that allowing things to reach this point had been a mistake he should never repeat. In the days that followed, he noticed a clear change. Yunji stopped coming into his room altogether and began avoiding him whenever possible. She started returning home late more often, and he convinced himself that this distance was for the best. He also reflected that, after meeting Sula, he had begun to lose control of himself, and it was better to cut things off before they became more dangerous. One evening, during an office dinner, his colleagues seemed unusually concerned about him. When asked if something was wrong, he dismissed their worries, but they continued to question him, even hinting at rumors circulating in the office about his relationship. He firmly denied everything, stating that such claims were baseless and instructing them to focus on their work. To put an end to the speculation, he clarified that the girl they had seen was his niece. After excusing himself, he headed to the restroom, feeling mentally exhausted and realizing that the situation had become more complicated than he had anticipated. Inside the restroom, he unexpectedly encountered Sula again. She appeared excited upon seeing him and mentioned that she had thought she recognized him from a distance. She then questioned why he had been ignoring her messages. He asked whether she had followed him there, but she insisted that it was merely a coincidence, explaining that she was also attending a departmental dinner. However, Jintaek remained concerned about his reputation and chose not to engage further, leaving her behind. As he walked away, he thought to himself that she was not giving him even a moment to breathe. Later, he found himself crossing paths with her again near the sinks while washing his hands, further intensifying his frustration. Sula, who was already involved with him, unexpectedly noticed that Jintaek was present at the same restaurant where she was dining with her friends. Upon realizing this, Jintaek tried to maintain composure and explained that he understood it was merely a coincidence and that one of them should probably leave to avoid any complications. He further added that if anyone from his workplace happened to see him alone with her, especially near the restroom area, it could create unnecessary trouble for him. However, Sula did not take his concern seriously and continued teasing him playfully. While they were in the middle of this tense exchange, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Acting quickly, he grabbed her and pulled her aside to hide inside the bathroom to avoid being seen together. After the situation settled, it was implied that the two of them once again ended up spending time together, continuing their so-called cardio training session. Once everything was over, they went their separate ways. Later, when Jintaek returned to sit with his colleagues, one of them observed that he seemed emotionally unsettled, almost as if he had been going through a roller coaster of feelings. His expression appeared tense and slightly guilty, which did not go unnoticed. The colleague asked about Nayeon, and Jintaek was informed that she had gone to the convenience store to get a hangover remedy drink, as she had been worried about him. Hearing this, Jintaek reflected internally that if he continued drinking, he might end up making even bigger mistakes. He then asked for some water, trying to steady himself. At that moment, he unexpectedly saw Sula again, sitting with her group of friends, which visibly startled him. Although her friends attempted to engage her in conversation, she seemed distracted, as she was busy messaging Jintaek. Shortly afterward, she quietly left the restaurant, and Jintaek followed her outside. This interaction did not go unnoticed, as Nahyun happened to see both of them together outside, which raised her suspicions about the nature of their relationship. After leaving together, Jintaek dropped Sula off and asked her to return the coat she had been wearing. In response, she casually explained that she had only intended to borrow it until she reached home, adding that since she lived alone, her place tended to feel cold. She then invited him to come inside. At that moment, Jintaek realized that she might be deliberately using such excuses to draw him in. He briefly considered refusing, thinking that the weather was not cold enough to justify going inside and that he could simply return home without taking the coat back. Despite these thoughts, he ultimately decided to go with her. Once inside, the two of them once again spent time together, continuing their cardio training session. On the other side, Yunji began to feel increasingly worried about Jintaek. At that moment, she received a call from her mother, who asked about her uncle. Yunji replied that he had mentioned he would be late, as he was attending a work dinner. Her mother then asked whether the two of them were getting along well, and expressed some concern, saying that she regretted not being able to visit due to her busy schedule. She also added that perhaps it would have been better if Yunji had her own separate place. However, Yunji reassured her by saying that everything was fine. The next day at work, Jintaek received a message from Yunji informing him that she would be late that day. As he looked at their chat history, he reflected that their conversations had become so distant that it felt as if they were practically strangers. At the same time, Sula also sent him a message, telling him that he had forgotten her report. Reading her message, he felt as if he could almost hear her voice through the text, which only added to his frustration. Just then, Nayeon approached him and asked about his condition, mentioning that he had looked unwell the previous day. She explained that she had brought something for him, but he had already left by the time she arrived. As the conversation continued, Nayeon casually asked whether he had been with his niece the previous evening. This question caught him off guard, and he nervously asked if she had seen them. She confirmed that she had noticed them by chance. Trying to downplay the situation, he laughed and explained that they had simply run into each other and that Yunji had been drunk, which made her behave a bit more affectionately than usual. Nayeon responded by saying that it did seem like Yunji was quite affectionate, and she found it rather nice. However, Jintaek added that if such a scene were mentioned to others, it could easily be misunderstood. Nayeon agreed and suggested that it would be better to keep the matter between them to avoid unnecessary trouble within the team. He expressed relief that it had been her who saw them, and she reassured him that he could share such concerns with her anytime. As Friday approached and he was driving home, Jintaek found his thoughts drifting. Although Nayeon had been talking about Sula, it was Yunji who occupied his mind. He reflected that he was now her only family, and felt that he should have handled things more carefully, considering his role as her guardian. While driving, he noticed a young girl sitting at a bus stop with a boy. The girl appeared heavily intoxicated, and the boy beside her seemed suspicious, as if he did not have good intentions. As Jintaek looked more closely, he was shocked to realize that the girl was Yunji. He immediately stopped and approached them. The boy, startled by his presence, quickly ran away. Yunji, barely able to stand, collapsed against Jintaek, clearly drunk. Concerned, he helped her into the car and drove her home. Once they arrived, he told her that he knew she was pretending to be asleep. He also commented on her condition and behavior. Yunji, in a frustrated tone, told him that he was not her real father and that he should not interfere. This upset him, and he responded that he could not stay calm after seeing her in such a vulnerable situation. She asked him to stop yelling, while he insisted that, although he could not completely control her actions, she needed to be more careful. especially when it came to drinking and staying out late. Noticing her suspicious expression, he added that if her actions were driven by curiosity about men, then he would explain everything to her himself. At that moment, a strange feeling passed through his mind, as he believed he could manage the situation on his own. However, Yunji then demanded that he teach her everything, referring again to the cardio training sessions. This request angered him, but eventually, the tension led them into yet another complicated and emotionally charged interaction. The next day at work, during lunch, Jintaek reflected on the previous night, realizing that although he had managed to handle the situation, things could not continue in such a manner. At that moment, Nayeon appeared and noticed that he had accidentally burned his hand with hot coffee. She immediately showed concern, asking him to place his hand under cold water and helping him with first aid. When he explained that he had been distracted, she pointed out that he had seemed lost in his own thoughts lately. She gently encouraged him to open up, saying that if something was bothering him, he could at least talk about it and she would be willing to listen. In response, he presented a hypothetical situation, asking her to imagine having feelings for someone she had known for a long time, someone she now saw differently, but could not act upon because the relationship was complicated and difficult to change. Nayeon thought about it carefully and replied that in such a situation, she would first try to understand her own feelings clearly before taking any action, as that would help her handle things more responsibly. After hearing her perspective, Jintaek seemed to gain some clarity. He changed the topic, mentioning that it was getting late, and thanked her for her help. As he left, Nayeon remained behind, feeling confused and wondering whether the conversation had actually been about his own situation. Later, while driving home, Jintaek reflected that looking at the situation from a different perspective had helped him clear his mind. He admitted to himself that Nayeon had been right and that perhaps he had started to see Yunji differently. However, just as these thoughts were settling in, he received a call from Sula, who informed him that Yunji had injured her foot during sports practice. Without hesitation, he rushed to see Yunji immediately. When Jintaek arrived at the location, he happened to cross paths with Sula first. His expression immediately showed concern as he asked about Yunji's condition. Sula informed him that it was only an ankle sprain and, fortunately, did not appear to be serious. However, she added that the timing was unfortunate as the preliminary rounds of the competition were approaching soon. According to what she had heard from the coach, Yunji would need to rest from training for a while, and participating in the competition was now out of the question. Hearing this, Jintaek felt a slight sense of relief that the injury was not severe, even though the situation itself remained disappointing. He was then told that Yunji was in the track team's locker room. When he arrived there, he found Yunji sitting quietly, looking deeply emotional and distressed. Without saying much, he helped her up and took her home. On the way, he felt a growing sense of sympathy for her, knowing how hard she had prepared for the competition, only for it to end like this. He asked whether she needed to go to the hospital to check for any other injuries, but she replied that it was not necessary. Instead of heading directly home, he changed direction and suggested that they should get some fresh air. After driving for a while, they stepped out of the car, and he told her that she would soon understand where they were. It turned out to be a coastal road, with the vast sea stretching endlessly before them. Yunji was visibly surprised. Jintaek explained that this was a place he often came to whenever he felt overwhelmed or frustrated. He reflected internally that looking at the endless sea made him feel small in comparison, which somehow brought him a sense of calm. He also thought that, although he was not good at comforting others and often ended up hurting them unintentionally, perhaps bringing her here might help ease her feelings. After a while, he mentioned that it was getting cold and suggested they should head back. However, Yunji expressed her desire to go closer, down toward the bridge area, and they soon made their way there. As they walked, he asked whether she was feeling any discomfort. She replied that the sand felt soft beneath her feet and that the swelling had reduced, although there was still some pain. She admitted that she felt capable of running, but had been advised not to, as pushing herself might worsen the injury. She explained that even though it was not a major competition, she had been frustrated because she knew the coaches were stopping her for the sake of her future. She confessed that she had felt so upset earlier that she could have cried, but being there by the sea had improved her mood significantly. Jintaek observed her carefully and felt that bringing her there had been the right decision. However, when she stepped into the water, he became concerned and quickly approached her. Before she could lose her balance, he lifted her up, asking if she was all right. Afterward, the two of them went to a nearby hotel to rest and freshen up. He took a shower, and they stayed there for a short time, changing into dry clothes. He informed her that they would remain there briefly to recover from the outing. Yunji expressed her gratitude, telling him that the experience felt like a small trip and that it had helped her feel much better. She admitted that if it had not been for him, she might have spent the entire day feeling depressed. She then said that she did not want to go home yet and insisted that they stay at the hotel for the night. Jintaek recalled that when he had checked in earlier, only a 2-bedroom option had been available, which he had accepted. Initially, he had not planned to stay overnight, but Eunji continued insisting, saying that leaving too soon would only bring her mood down again. Unable to refuse her, he found himself agreeing, though he also remembered the advice Nayeon had given him earlier that day, which lingered in his mind. After spending some time talking, the atmosphere between them gradually shifted, and once again, they became involved in another complicated training session, further blurring the boundaries of their relationship. Later, after leaving the hotel, Jintaek suggested that they should visit the hospital to ensure her injury was properly treated. However, Yunji dismissed the idea, saying that her foot was not that bad and that she had already soaked it the previous day, which had made it feel much better. As they sat in the car, he advised her to be careful around men and told her that if she ever met someone, she should make sure he was decent and sincere. Yunji responded by reminding him that she had already said she did not want any other man, adding that such situations made her uncomfortable. Hearing this, Jintaek quietly reflected that, for the time being, it might be best to accept things as they were, even though he knew the situation was far from simple. The next day, Eunji's friends Heeju, Minseo, and Soyoung came to visit her at home. While they were there, they also encountered Jintaek standing nearby, and it was observed that they were immediately impressed by his appearance, openly praising him and calling him handsome. In response, Jintaek casually mentioned that Eunji was getting ready to change her clothes, adding that she had been very excited knowing that her friends were coming to pick her up. Minseo then commented that Eunji seemed to talk about her father quite often these days. At that moment, Eunji suddenly entered the scene and quickly responded, explaining that she had only mentioned him a few times during their conversations and that it was not as if she was obsessed with him. Jintaek, noticing the growing attention and slightly awkward atmosphere, suggested that they should get going. Meanwhile, her friends continued to stand there, clearly captivated by his presence. Later, when Eunji returned home, Jintaek asked about her ankle and whether it was improving. She replied that with proper taping, she was now able to do light jogging, although she still needed to be careful. She explained that the coaches had advised her to continue stretching regularly to prevent stiffness. Jintaek then asked whether she could manage the stretching on her own. Eunji responded that it was something they usually did together after training, but she had missed it earlier because she had rushed out when he came to pick her up. She then asked him to help her with the stretching. At that moment, Jintaek reflected on how different things had become between them. Previously, there had always been a certain distance, but now she was asking for his help without any hesitation. As he began assisting her and giving her a light massage, he found himself wishing that things had not become so complicated. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was a call from the director regarding work, interrupting the moment. The following day at the office, Jintaek sent Eunji a message asking her to have dinner without him, as he would be late. While working, he found himself recalling the previous night, realizing that although her behavior had changed, the closeness between them was affecting him more than he wanted to admit. Around that time, Nahyun approached him and discussed some work-related matters. He complimented her on doing a great job and suggested that she should head home soon. However, she asked if he needed any further help. He replied that only some organizing work was left, and that he could handle it himself. Nahyun then mentioned that she had been thinking about checking out a new cafe nearby, and suggested that she could bring him some coffee. Jintaek responded that he also wanted to get some fresh air, and the two of them decided to leave the office together. As they walked, he apologized for suddenly asking her to help with the report, but she reassured him that it was fine since it was work-related. He thanked her for quickly gathering the necessary data, saying that it had helped them complete their tasks efficiently. She then jokingly asked whether he planned to treat her to coffee as a thank you, but quickly added that it should actually be a proper dinner instead. Jintaek agreed, and they headed to the cafe. Upon arriving, Nayeon mentioned that a colleague had recommended the place, especially praising its latte. However, as they entered, Jintaek was surprised to see that one of the employees was none other than Sula. Nayeon also recognized her and remarked that she looked familiar, recalling that she had seen her with Jintaek at the bar previously. Jintaek, trying to remain composed, confirmed this casually. Sula greeted them politely and introduced herself as Jintaek's niece. However, she subtly teased the situation by commenting on Jintaek and Nayeon's dynamic, suggesting that they looked more than just co-workers. Jintaek quickly stopped her, telling her not to speak nonsense, and asked why she was working there. Sula explained that she had started working part-time at the cafe just the previous day and asked if they would like to place an order. As they sat down, Jintaek felt uneasy, thinking that she always seemed to appear unexpectedly whenever he tried to distance himself. Still, he reassured himself that as long as she maintained boundaries, things would remain manageable. Meanwhile, he overheard other customers admiring Sula's beauty, which only added to his discomfort. Nahyun continued discussing work with him, while Sula quietly observed the two of them. After finishing their coffee, Jintaek returned to the office to complete some remaining work. Later, he received a message from Sula asking whether he was still working overtime. Without much hesitation, he went back to the cafe. When he arrived, he saw Sula attempting to change a light bulb on her own. He asked about the manager, and she replied that he had already left. She admitted that she had been doing all the tasks herself while waiting for someone, even though it felt a bit scary. Concerned, Jintaek told her not to do such risky work alone, warning that if she got hurt, no one would be there to help her. She apologized, and as he mentioned that his bag was in the storage room, she clung to him playfully, which visibly irritated him. He then asked whether she had told anyone at work that she was his niece. He replied that since Nayeon had already seen them together, he had no choice but to say so. Sula says that she would have to start calling him uncle instead of Mr. from now on. He accepted this without much reaction. However, she once again pushed the boundaries by urging him to spend time with her, suggesting another training session. Despite his initial resistance, he eventually gave in. Yunji was at home, feeling increasingly worried about Jintaek, as it had gotten quite late and he still had not returned. While she was lost in her thoughts, she suddenly received a message from Heju. In the message, Heju explained that she had tried to cook something for her boyfriend, but it had turned into a complete disaster. She also mentioned that their other friends had been teasing her endlessly about it. Hearing this made Eunji think, and she began to feel that perhaps she should also try cooking something for Jintaek. Meanwhile, on the other side, Jintaek had just finished a workout session with Sula. He expressed his gratitude to her, mentioning that when Eunji had gotten hurt, she had contacted him immediately, and he truly appreciated that gesture. In response, Sula casually said that Yunji was her friend, and since she already had his contact number, it had not been a big deal for her to inform him. However, Jintaek insisted that just because it had been easy for her did not mean it was not something worth being thankful for. Hearing this, Sula remarked that she had never expected to be praised by him like that. Jintaek then reassured her not to worry, but Sula quickly responded that she was not a child and already understood what he was concerned about. She added that she would not put him in an awkward position, and after saying that, she left. Afterward, Jintaek returned home, where he found Eunji asleep while watching a cooking video on her laptop. Seeing her like that, he thought to himself that she was someone who could be just a little more honest and emotional, and perhaps a little more open to expressing her complaints. Soon after, he went to bed as well. While sleeping, he had a dream in which he was doing a cardio training session with his sister-in-law. When he woke up, he felt confused and uneasy. He reflected that they had only had a brief conversation the previous day, so having such a dream felt very unexpected. He reminded himself that they had merely exchanged simple greetings and that nothing significant had happened between them. However, he could not ignore the fact that when Eunji, along with his past memories connected to his family, began to resurface, it stirred something within him. He questioned whether that could really be the reason for having such a dream about his sister-in-law. He admitted to himself that he had once had feelings for her when he was younger, but that had been years ago, and he believed those feelings must have faded by now. As he stepped out of his room, he was suddenly startled to see someone standing in front of him. In his confusion, he said that he could not see properly, and some of the things he was holding ended up falling to the ground. However, he soon became aware of his surroundings and realized that it was Eunji standing there, with groceries in her hands. She looked concerned and asked him if he was okay, while he quickly brushed it off, saying it was nothing serious. Eunji then explained that she had gone grocery shopping while he was asleep because there was something she wanted to try making. She also asked if he would like to try some dishes later. After that, she went into the kitchen and began looking through recipes, saying that she needed to finish everything quickly. Watching her, Jintaek found himself thinking about the past. It reminded him of when Sula used to play with him when they were younger. Back then, he had been so focused that he had not realized how much she resembled someone else. But now, seeing Eunji, he could not help but notice how similar she looked, especially to her mother. At the same time, he reminded himself that he was no longer the same person he had been back then. Eventually, he went into the kitchen to help Eunji with the cooking, though his mind was still filled with complicated thoughts. While helping her, he accidentally cut his hand with a knife. Eunji immediately became worried and rushed to him, but he tried to reassure her, insisting that it was just a small scratch and that he was completely fine. However, she noticed that his hand was bleeding and did her best to stop it. After dealing with the injury, Eunji mentioned that she was not really hungry and suggested that they should do a workout session before having dinner. Jintaek agreed, and they went on to complete their training together. Once they finished, Eunji told him that her training would officially begin the following Monday, and she would have to leave soon. Jintaek responded by telling her to be careful, especially since her pain had not fully gone away yet. Later, Eunji found herself reflecting on everything. She thought about how, ever since that day at the hotel, Jintaek had been acting as if nothing had happened between them. By going along with his attitude, Their lives had seemingly returned to their usual routine. However, deep down, she knew that he would not be able to keep pretending forever. At the same time, she admitted to herself that she was afraid that she might be the only one feeling things this deeply. On the other side, Nahyun received a call from her friend, who pointed out that she had been working overtime with her team leader and had even gone out to have a meal with him. Her friend teasingly suggested that this clearly meant the two of them were dating. In response, Nahyun denied it, explaining that it had merely been a simple meal and that there was nothing more to it. However, her friend continued to insist, encouraging her to turn the situation into a real relationship. She went on to comment that Nahyun might come across as somewhat cold despite her small stature, and added that it was entirely possible that the team leader might have feelings for her as well. She urged Nahyun to at least give it a try. The next day, Jintaek was on his way for a business trip and was seated on the plane, lost in thought. He recalled that he had informed Yunji about his trip and had told her that he would be back by the afternoon. Yunji, however, had insisted that Sula should come over during that time, and eventually he had agreed. As he sat there, he reflected on how a situation that had begun as a mere mistake now seemed to be influencing everything in his life. He thought about Sula, who had been taking care of Yunji, and considered how she was still young and vulnerable. He could not predict when she might become a weakness for him. Then his thoughts shifted to Yunji, and he wondered how much of a problem it was that she no longer seemed to see him just as family, but as a man. He concluded that, in the end, everything felt like a kind of realization for him, and he needed to put a stop to it. Otherwise, he feared that he would soon find himself in serious trouble, or perhaps he had already fallen into it. At that moment, Nahyun came and took a seat beside him. He remarked that she was a little late, to which she explained that she had had a restless night. She added that, for some reason, this business trip felt more like a vacation to her. He responded that since they were there for a seminar, rather than regular work, it made sense. She agreed, saying that it was a refreshing change of pace. Hearing that, he quietly thought to himself that perhaps this was exactly what he needed. By 8 p.m., at the end of the seminar that day, Nahyun felt completely exhausted. She commented that it had not been this demanding the previous year, and admitted that she just wanted to rest, adding that she was also very hungry. As Jintaek came out of the restroom, he happened to see her and approached her, telling her that she had done a good job that day. She then asked whether he was planning to attend a company dinner afterward. He replied that he did not really know anyone there, so he was thinking of skipping it, and asked about her plans. She responded that she did not know anyone either. He then suggested that they should go and have dinner together, mentioning that he had a place in mind. This made her feel unexpectedly happy. They soon headed to the hotel restaurant, and she was surprised by how nice it was. She found herself thinking that the place itself was not what mattered most. Rather, it was the fact that her team leader had specifically chosen it, which made her feel as though he wanted to spend time with her. During dinner, he poured alcohol into her glass, but she reminded him that he could not use the corporate card to pay for alcohol. He reassured her that it was fine, explaining that since they had promised to have dinner after work, he would cover it himself that day, and encouraged her to have a drink as well. As she tried to control her expressions, he mentioned that he had chosen the place with the thought that a woman might like it, and asked for her opinion. She responded that it was a nice place. He then admitted that he had come there for her and had hoped that she would like it. Hearing this, she said that it was great, feeling slightly shy. As the evening went on, Nahyun ended up drinking quite a lot. Later, he helped her back to the hotel and guided her to her room, telling her that they had arrived. As he looked at her in that state, he thought that he probably should have stopped her from drinking so much. Seeing the usually composed and sharp woman so drunk made him wonder if she had been going through something difficult. He reassured himself that, since the schedule for the next day was light, she would likely be fine. He then decided that he would simply cover her with a blanket and leave, so as not to make things awkward. However, just as he was about to go, she regained a bit of consciousness, noticed that he was still there, and suddenly confessed that she really liked him. This unexpected admission left him completely shocked. On the other hand, Sula and Yunji were at home together when Sula realized that their university professor had assigned them an interview task. The professor had instructed them to interview a company team leader, something Sula strongly disliked. She complained that it would have been much easier if they had just been asked to write a report, but instead, the professor had complicated everything. Frustrated, she asked Yunji whether she knew any company team leader who could help them. At that moment, Sula suddenly remembered how Nahyun had referred to Jintaek as team leader earlier at the cafe. Excited by the realization, she exclaimed that she actually knew someone. Yunji was surprised and asked who she was referring to, and Sula replied that it was her father. However, Yunji hesitated and said that she did not want to bother him with something like that. Sula tried to convince her, suggesting that she should at least ask him once. She reasoned that if he refused, there would be nothing more they could do, but it was still worth trying. Meanwhile, Jintaek was busy conducting an exercise session with Na-yeon. The next day at work, Na-yeon found it difficult to concentrate on her tasks. She reflected on how, during the morning meeting, she had struggled with a presentation, and her colleagues had ended up making fun of her. She also noticed that Jintaek had been behaving the same way as usual, while she herself felt increasingly confused with each passing day. Deep down, she found herself wishing that the events of that night had not marked the end of something between them, but rather, the beginning. However, she quickly brushed those thoughts aside and decided that she should at least grab something from the convenience store for lunch. At that same time, Yunji and Sula arrived at Jintaek's office to speak with him. Sula explained that his office was close to the place where she worked part-time, and she had discovered it by chance. Yunji, however, felt uneasy and questioned whether it was really appropriate to enter his office without informing him beforehand. Sula insisted that simply showing up would be more effective than asking in advance. As they stood there, Na-yeon noticed Sula and recognized her. Yunji felt nervous walking through the unfamiliar office when Na-yeon approached them from behind and greeted Sula, referring to her as Jintaek's niece. Na-yeon then turned to Yunji and remarked that she remembered her as the colleague who had been at the cafe with her uncle previously. She added that it was hard to forget someone as beautiful as her. Yunji felt completely confused by the situation, and Sula quickly pulled her aside to avoid further awkwardness. Sula then explained that she had previously told Na-yeon that she was Jintaek's niece to prevent any strange rumors from spreading. Meanwhile, Na-yeon asked Sula whether Yunji was her friend, and Yunji politely greeted her. Na-yeon then mentioned that if they were there to see Jintaek, they would only have to wait a moment, as he would be coming down soon. Soon after, Jintaek came downstairs and was visibly surprised to see all of them standing there. Sula approached him and explained that they had to conduct an interview with a team manager for one of their elective classes. She asked if he could help them by answering a few questions and allowing them to take a photo as proof. She also asked whether he had enough time for it. Jintaek replied that he was not too busy in the afternoon and would be able to make some time for them. He then asked whether they had eaten lunch, and when they said they had not, he invited them to eat together. He also asked Na-yeon to join them, and eventually, all four of them went out to have a meal. During lunch at the cafe where Sula worked, Sula and Yunji conducted the interview with Jintaek. Afterward, Na-yeon returned alone to the office for the rest of her workday. Time passed quickly, and before she realized it, it was already time to go home. She felt exhausted and was about to leave when Jintaek approached her and asked if she was heading out. He offered to give her a ride home, and after a moment, she agreed. On the other side, Sula was talking to Yunji and commented that Jintaek's colleague from earlier had seemed a bit too much. She admitted that she felt somewhat suspicious about her, but Yunji denied it, saying that Jintaek did not seem to have any particular feelings toward Na-yeon. Sula, however, thought to herself that Yunji did not understand, and she was actually referring to her own feelings, which made her feel a sense of guilt. Back at the office, after organizing their documents, Na-yeon and Jintaek got into the car to head home. As she sat there, Na-yeon found herself wondering whether she should say something about what had happened, questioning if it was all because of the mistake she had made that day. Before she could speak, Jintaek began explaining the situation. He clarified that the girls who had come to the office earlier were not what they seemed. He explained that the one introduced as his niece was actually his niece's friend, Sula, while the girl beside her was his real niece, Yunji. He added that there had been certain circumstances, which was why he had introduced Sula as his niece, and he wanted Na-yeon to know the truth since it involved his family. Upon hearing this, Na-yeon admitted that dealing with things that were so easy to misunderstand had become overwhelming for her. She said that after everything that had happened between them on the business trip, she could no longer take such matters lightly. Jintaek apologized, saying that he was sorry for not being clear earlier. Meanwhile, on the other side, Sula insisted that Yunji should go back to Jintaek's office, reasoning that since he already knew they were nearby, they might as well ask him for a ride home. As Yunji stood on the other side of the road, she suddenly noticed a familiar car. To her shock, she realized that it was Jintaek's car and that he was inside it with Na-yeon. Both of them were sharing a kiss. Sula and Yunji returned home together, and Sula immediately began expressing her thoughts, stating that it was clearly an affair and that he was involved with another woman, despite having a wife. She added that the situation was obvious to anyone and insisted that they should have told Yunji's mother about it. Yunji, however, responded that she did not know what to think, mentioning that her head was hurting from everything. Sula then admitted that she was not in a position to judge someone for having an affair, as she herself had only intended to have a bit of fun, but now it had become evident that the relationship in question was serious. Meanwhile, Yunji became lost in her own thoughts. She reflected on whether she might be similar to her father and considered that it might be natural for him to have a lover. She recalled that whenever he was with her, it had often felt as though he was simply going along with her expectations. She acknowledged that she had never truly expected him to care only for her, and had always known that a day like this might eventually come. These thoughts gradually made her feel deeply upset. At the same time, on the other side, he was engaged in an intense workout session with Nayeon. Back at home, Sula and Yunji sat together, contemplating the situation. Sula speculated that he might not even return home that night and suggested that Yunji should call him. Eunji refused, which led Sula to suddenly blurt out that she felt jealous. This confession surprised Eunji, who became somewhat furious and demanded to know why Sula would feel jealous in such a situation. Eunji pointed out that she had already sensed something unusual at work, and now Sula was behaving unusually friendly toward her father while also admitting jealousy, which seemed completely contradictory. Sula, in turn, argued that Eunji was reacting strangely, as anyone would be upset upon hearing that their father was involved with another woman, yet Eunji was speaking of jealousy instead. She insisted that Eunji's reaction made no sense, and that Eunji was the one behaving oddly. At that point, Eunji revealed the truth that he was not actually her biological father, but her uncle. She explained that her father and her uncle were not blood-related brothers, as her grandparents had been unable to have a child and had adopted her father before later having her uncle. Sula interpreted this information as meaning that there was nothing wrong, since they were not blood-related, but Eunji clarified that she had not said everything was fine. Sula continued to rationalize the situation by saying that he was effectively single, and therefore there was nothing inherently wrong, especially considering that they had already spent time with him during workout sessions. Eunji, however, objected strongly, telling Sula not to treat the matter lightly just because she had spent time with him. She emphasized that, regardless of their interactions, the real issue was that he was currently involved with someone else. Sula then explained that the reason she had grown so attached to him was because he was straightforward, thoughtful, and handsome. Yunji went on to share the full story of their workout session experiences with him. Despite everything, Sula maintained that it did not feel right to simply let him be taken away like this. She insisted that this was not the time for them to argue with each other and that instead, they should try to win him back. She proposed that she would approach him at his workplace while Eunji continued managing things at home. Over the next few days, both of them made various efforts to attract his attention, but none of their attempts were successful. Eventually, one day when he returned from work, Eunji asked him if Sula could stay over for the night, to which he agreed. This had actually been part of a plan they had devised. Later, when he went to his room and began working on his laptop, both Eunji and Sula joined him under the pretense of discussing a presentation they had to deliver. He encouraged them as they talked, though he quietly felt that they were becoming too close to him. Sula then brought him some food she had prepared and offered it to him, but he replied that he had already eaten dinner. Yunji also insisted that he should at least try it, but he refused again, stating that it was not the time for them to be playing around and that he needed to sleep early because he had work the next morning. After witnessing his reaction, both girls felt embarrassed, yet they encouraged each other not to let this failure discourage them. On the other hand, as he lay in bed that night, he reflected on how both of them had been acting increasingly bold and acknowledged that the situation was becoming dangerous. He resolved that he needed to maintain distance from them, though he found it difficult and realized that it was time to establish clear boundaries. Later that night, he woke up to find Sula in his room, suggesting that they engage in a cardio workout session together. Although hesitant, he eventually agreed. Soon after, Eunji also joined them, and the three of them ended up participating in an intense workout session together. The following day, he was sitting alone in a park, appearing troubled and disappointed. At that moment, Nayeon arrived, as he had been waiting for her. When she appeared, he gathered the courage to speak and informed her that he wanted to break up and that they should stop seeing each other. This left her extremely frustrated, and she began demanding an explanation. She questioned whether he truly believed she was the kind of person who would reveal their relationship at work. Confused by her reaction, he struggled to respond as she continued raising her voice in public, insisting on knowing the truth. Eventually, they both went to her place, where he explained all the reasons behind his decision to break up. She listened silently as he revealed everything, showing her sides of himself he had never exposed before in his working life. After finishing, he felt a strange sense of relief, realizing that she had cared for him without fully knowing his flaws, and he felt guilty for doing something he considered unforgivable. However, Nayeon responded in a way that surprised him. She remarked that if she had known he was someone who would behave like this, she might have made a move on him much earlier. She explained that his actions stemmed from a sense of obligation and guilt, and that this level of guilt did not justify ending their relationship. She acknowledged that even someone as seemingly perfect as him had flaws, and she had come to understand and accept that, perhaps having sensed it subconsciously all along. She also mentioned that she was aware of the two young girls being drawn to him, but claimed that she did not care. After this, the two of them continued spending time together, even engaging in workout sessions as before. Several months later, Nayeon was at his home, and the two of them were planning a vacation together. She commented that the quality of a vacation depended on his physical condition and advised him to bring motion sickness medicine. Outside the house, Sula and Yunji were also present, still determined to gain his attention and somehow separate him from Nahyeon. As they prepared to leave for the trip, Eunji mentioned that when she had told her mother about going on vacation with him, her mother had eventually given permission. He felt relieved upon hearing this and suggested that they should get going, adding that they could stop at a rest area on the way to the airport. In the end, it was revealed that he had married Nahyeon and felt grateful toward Eunji, considering her as his daughter.